Let's talk about the British Empire, because if you want to understand modern geopolitics, it helps to know about this one weird trick that the British used to dominate most of the world for a very long time. So we're going to do something different with this video. We're going to try to summarize the entirety of British imperial history in 10 minutes. Now let's go. In order to understand the rise of the British Empire, it helps to understand where they were starting from. Great Britain is an island, specifically these islands off the coast of Europe, known as the British Isles. This is also the origin of the name Britain, because at the time of the Roman Empire, the people living here were called the Britons. And since then, the people living there have largely been called the British. These islands are kind of small compared to continental Europe, which is why when the Romans came around asking for nice things, the answer was generally no. So they left. The Romans didn't stick around to build roads or aqueducts like they did in other parts of their empire, but they did leave behind Latin, which evolved into the various Romance languages of Britain today. For most of the period after the Romans left, the British Isles were occupied by Anglo-Saxon tribes, who established several independent kingdoms. Meanwhile, across the North Sea, Scandinavian Vikings were pillaging across Europe, including in Britain. And so to defend themselves, the English kings hired the Vikings as mercenaries. One such mercenary was a guy named Rollo, who conquered much of northern France for the Frankish king in exchange for making him Duke of Normandy, establishing a duchy that would become the cultural and linguistic bridge between England and France, which would be very important later. For its part, England became a loose collection of kingdoms until the 9th century, when a guy named Egbert of Wessex asserted dominance over the others and established what would become known as the Kingdom of England. Now, meanwhile, Ireland had its own history during this time. Like England, it was initially divided into many small kingdoms. But in the 12th century, the Kingdom of Ireland would unite most of the island under the High Kingship of Ireland, except for a small province in the northeast called Ulster, which broke away to become the Kingdom of Ulster. And some parts of Ireland were also controlled by the English, but that wouldn't last. By the 16th century, the English were becoming more powerful and began to assert control over the Irish kingdoms, subjugating them through conquest and forced assimilation. Much of Ireland would remain under English control to this day. But back in England, the Anglo-Saxon kings had been replaced by a new royal house, the Normans, who brought with them a new language, French. After defeating the English at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, William the Conqueror imposed Norman French as the language of the court and the aristocracy, while English became the common language of the people. This bilingualism contributed to the development of the English language, which took the old French spoken by the upper class and mixed it with the various Germanic languages of the commoners. As the Middle Ages went on, England would grow through conquest, first by taking over Wales, and then by fighting a series of wars with Scotland to take over northern England. In the 13th century, the English King John was forced to sign the Magna Carta, which limited the power of the monarchy and established the English Parliament. A key moment in the development of representative government, even if only for the English nobility. Meanwhile, England had been involved in a long and complicated rivalry with the Spanish Empire over control of the seas and the city of Normandy. The English won important victories against the Spanish Armada and then fought the Spanish in battles across Europe and the Caribbean. But they also grew increasingly sympathetic to the plight of the Spanish colonies in the Americas, who revolted against Spanish rule and sought independence. And in 1776, the American colonies did just that, winning their war for independence and creating the United States of America. And the loss of these colonies hurt the economy of Britain. They needed to find somewhere else to get rich. In the meantime, the Industrial Revolution started in Britain, which gave it a huge advantage in terms of technology and industry over other nations. The British Empire was now ready to start exploring and conquering. And so we come to the age of exploration and colonization. The British East India Company was formed in 1600 and began trading with various Indian states, eventually conquering them and making the region a British colony. In Africa, the British colonized South Africa and set up trading posts along the coast. Australia would also become a British colony. And so the British Empire started to take shape, a far-flung network of colonies and dependencies spread out across the globe. The 7 Years' War was a global conflict fought between Britain and France in the 18th century, which saw battles in Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. It was the culmination of a long rivalry between the two colonial powers and resulted in significant territorial changes. The war effectively ended French colonial ambitions and established Britain as the dominant global power, setting the stage for the peak of the British Empire. Britain would fight another major war against the Dutch, securing British naval supremacy and expanding its empire. During this period, Britain pursued an active colonization policy, establishing settlements in various parts of the world, including Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These efforts aimed to expand British territory and influence, contributing to the growth and diversification of the empire. In the early 19th century, the British Empire reached its greatest extent geographically. By this point, the British had colonized most of South Africa and Australia, as well as large parts of India. They also had many smaller colonies and dependencies scattered across the world. At its peak, the British Empire encompassed approximately 1/4 of the Earth's land surface and controlled about 1/4 of the world's population. This vast empire stretched from North America to South America, from Africa to Asia, and from Australia to the Pacific Islands. As the 19th century progressed, the British Empire faced challenges. Internal tensions and external pressures began to emerge. In India, rebellions such as the Sepoy Mutiny highlighted the growing discontent among the local populations under British rule. Meanwhile, European powers began to challenge British dominance, particularly in Africa and Asia. The scramble for Africa saw European powers rapidly colonizing the continent, while competition in Asia intensified, leading to conflicts such as the First Sino-Japanese War. However, the British managed to maintain their position as a global power. They fought and won several major wars against other European powers, cementing their status as the dominant military force of the era. They also continued to expand their colonial holdings, taking control of regions such as Burma and Malaya. Additionally, the British introduced reforms and infrastructure projects in their colonies, including railways, education systems, and legal institutions, which contributed to the development of these regions. By the early 20th century, the nature of the British Empire was shifting. The focus was increasingly on maintaining and defending the existing colonies, rather than further expansion. The Second World War proved to be a watershed moment for the British Empire. It was a global conflict that involved all of the major powers and resulted in immense loss of life and economic hardship. The war also had profound consequences for the British Empire itself. During the war, the British fought against various enemies, including Germany, Italy, and Japan. They faced numerous challenges such as the Battle of Britain, the war in North Africa, and the campaigns in the Far East. Despite these hardships, the British ultimately emerged victorious, contributing to the defeat of the Axis powers. However, the war also marked the beginning of the decline of the British Empire. The war had taken a heavy toll on the British economy, and the country was no longer able to maintain its global empire. Various colonies and dominions began to move towards independence, and the British government started to withdraw from its overseas territories. In Africa, colonies such as Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria gained independence from British rule, marking the end of British colonial rule on the continent. Similarly, in Asia, British colonies like India, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Singapore achieved independence. These independence movements were driven by various factors, including rising nationalism, demands for self-determination, and the changing political landscape after the Second World War. The decline of the British Empire can be attributed to several factors. The immense cost of maintaining such a vast empire, coupled with economic challenges and the changing political dynamics of the post-war era, contributed to its gradual dismantling. The rise of nationalism and the desire for self-determination among the colonized peoples also played a significant role in the collapse of the British Empire. As colonies gained independence, the empire shrank considerably. Finally, the end of the British Empire can be seen as a consequence of historical forces that were set in motion centuries ago. The Industrial Revolution and the subsequent economic and technological advancements that occurred in Britain created the conditions for the rise and expansion of the empire. However, these very advancements eventually led to the decline and fall of the empire as other nations, particularly the United States and Soviet Union, caught up and surpassed Britain in terms of industrialization, military power, and global influence. The end of the British Empire thus represents a turning point in world history, marking the shift from an era dominated by European colonialism to a new era of decolonization and the emergence of new global powers. Okay, I lied. It was not 6 minutes. But hey, now you know everything there is to know about the British Empire. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this.